This is an ABC podcast.
Hello, a big welcome to the Hub on Art here on RN. Thank you so much for listening. My name's Ed Ayres. So when I do these introductions to the shows each week, I look at all the stories the team have gathered for you. And I look at the links between them. That's, by the way, the stories, not the team. But with the stories today, there seem to be two common themes. The first is how preconceptions about things can lock us into certain ways of thinking, not always good ways, and how art can help us move to a kind of freer mental space. And the second theme for today, and perhaps the more important one, is the need to seize what we have in our lives right now, because we never know what will happen to us, to our friends and families, to our workmates, or to our community. And my first guest today shows by example the need to celebrate what we have in our hands. In this moment, his name is Bryan Dawe. The Moroccan port of Tangier is a meeting place. It's where the Strait of Gibraltar meets land, where Africa meets Europe. It's where Arabic meets Spanish meets French, where traders do business, vendors meet tourists, and alleyways meet in the Medina. It's where spies meet, and where authors meet to write about spies. And for many years, it's where Bryan Dawe has gone to meet friends and work on his art. Bryan was a familiar voice on the ABC as one half of the Clarke and Dawe political satirical duo, but for the past decade he's also been an exhibiting artist and photographer. Bryan's latest exhibition, Chimera, is about to open at Menion Art Gallery in regional Victoria. It's largely based on a 5-month period Bryan spent in Tangier last year. Bryan Dawe, thank you so much for coming onto the Hub on Art.
Oh, well, it's an absolute pleasure. Very nice music at the beginning of your program, by the way. I thought that should be noted in dispatches.
Bryan, thank you. Now, Bryan, what's special about Tangier?
It has many things, partly the history, but like any place that you end up loving, it's the people. And Tangier is a little different from the rest of Morocco in terms of its openness and its acceptance of people, because it's only 15 kilometres from Europe, Spain. And so it's used to people coming and going, you know, Spanish in particular, the French colonised the place. So they're used to that. And I grew up in Port Adelaide, and so it was a very familiar town and a feel, just the language was different. And but that's the main thing, and it's that freedom to be who you want to be, and as long as you don't, do anything stupid, they're very accepting of the way you, live.
Yeah. Can you pinpoint a little bit more what that feel of a port town is that seems to be a sort of universal feel?
Well, look, I've been to Marseille and Hamburg and Amsterdam, and whatever port town I've been to, I noticed that there is this, I don't know, when I first went to Marseille, everyone said, oh, well, just be a bit careful there, it's a whatever, and I went, no, I'll be fine. And I got off the train and went, no, this is good, this is easy, I get it. It is more edgy, there's no question about that. Tangier is a little more edgy too. The people who arrive for the first time, and most people going to Morocco off the ferry from Spain, tend to go through Tangier and go on to Fez or Marrakesh or Essaouira, wherever. But if you stay for longer than 2 or 3 days, then you start to see a depth to Tangier that's different from spending that amount of time in, say, Marrakesh. What you see is what you get in Fez, what you see is what you get in Marrakesh. But it's not what you see in Tangier until you spend 3-4 days there, and that's where I fell in love with the place.
And you obviously spent a lot longer there.
Yes, well, it was actually this year that I spent the 5 months there and was doing the work. And then last year I spent 3 months there, and then the year before that I had my exhibition, the first exhibition in Tangier. Yeah. And that was the beginning of it all, really.
Yes. Just before we go on to your works, Bryan, I was wondering, can you describe because it's such a beautiful description, your favourite cafe, the famous Café de Paris?
Café de Paris. Well, it's one of my favourite cafes.
Oh, okay.
This is the other thing about living in Tangier. Yeah. What you do is there's a loop that you do, and it seems that I fell into that loop, but that is one of my favourites, and it's opposite the French embassy, and it pretty much hasn't changed since it was built, and it has been over the years the absolute den of spies, pirates, crooks, politicians, everybody, and particularly leading up to World War II, it was just covered in spies and all trying to manipulate and do things. And that feeling's still there. And there are people still around that remember that period. Yeah. You know, they're getting on a bit now, but you can sit in there and you do get a sense of that, and also the literary side of Tangier, which, admittedly most of it's expat, but the beat generation of the 50s and 60s was pretty much based there, and a couple of other cafes, which are still the same as well. And so you can get a sense of, Paul Bowles or any of those. Capote was there. I mean, and the stories of the people that actually did know them, those people are still there.
Yes. Bryan, let's talk about your works now. So one of the works in your exhibition, Chimera, the exhibition Chimera, one of the works is called Grand Socko 1. It's a view over a public space. There's a fountain, people going about their business, bicycles, people walking, sitting around the fountain. There's tall palm trees, a row of buildings in the sunset. So what is this place?
Well, Grand Socko is the main central area of the Tangier Medina. It's the beginning where it separates pretty much the new town from the Medina, and from there you walk up a very steep hill to the Kasbah. But that view, what you're seeing in there, was taken from my rooftop of my apartment that I stayed at for 3 months when I first started doing the work there. And you spend a lot of time. If you walk across that square, you are in the souk, where you do all your shopping, all your vegetables, all your meat, everything. It's also, if you looked across that square, you'll see a building, a white and red building, and that's the Cinema Riff. And the Cinema Riff is the sort of central hub. It's a cinema. And it's the central hub of young people in Tangier, where they go there because they get free Wi-Fi, and they hang out there, and the coffee's a little bit cheaper and whatever. And I'm very proud to have one of my works hanging up there.
Yes, absolutely. Now, can you talk about the process of your work? Because this is a photograph, but it's been altered, so it looks like you're kind of looking through a screen. There's some brushwork. So how do you work to get these effects?
Okay, so look, there's no one particular method that I use, and you'd go through and say, what about that one? And I'd think, okay, that's what I did there. In the case of Grand Socko, there was a photograph to begin with, and then basically I applied a couple of programs to give me certain sort of looks, and then finally a paint program, very light paint program across. So it's you're not too sure whether that's a photograph or a painting. And that's the territory I like to work in, where you've got to look and think, well, what's that? Because I'm not a photographer. You mentioned that I'm a photographer. I don't know an f-stop from a whatever. All I know is how to frame, and I make sure that I get a really, a good shot. But that's not the point. I certainly wouldn't put on a photographic exhibition under my name.
Okay, that's good to know, Bryan.
I ring people when I need that. My son's a photographer. He's a director of photographer, and I just go, "What's that about?" And he goes, "God, you're stupid."
Oh, that's harsh. That's harsh.
Oh, yeah, he is harsh. My children are very harsh.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it's keeping you real, Bryan.
It does.
Yes. When you do take photographs, are you one of those people who take a lot with this ability now to take a lot with digital pictures, or are you a little bit more circumspect?
No, that's interesting because I've taught myself, because once I understood file management, I stopped taking a lot of photographs because it was driving me insane. No, I think that was the trap. I think, excuse me, when you start, you tend to fire a lot off. But if you've got the shot, sometimes now I just go, no. I mean, there's one in the exhibition called Tangier Port. That was the first shot and the only shot, and it's it worked for what I wanted. I got mainly the frame right. I've got, because it's hard to take a bad photograph with a decent camera,
Well, yes,
so
that's true. So you're a one-shot wonder, Bryan.
Sometimes, and I might take it for shift the angle and whatever. But again, as long as I've got the sort of idea that I'm looking at, the narrative that I'm going to try and work on, I can edit, and I do a lot of editing just to tighten it up or to see what it looks like. So yeah, and this wasn't a way that I intended to do all this when I first started doing the exhibitions years ago, because it was a totally different technique. I wasn't even using Photoshop. And then I decided that what I was trying to do, I couldn't get it right just doing it with that technique, and now I know what I'm doing. I like to think I'm on the trail.
Absolutely. No, but there's a sort of circus or carnival theme through some of these images as well. Why?
Yeah, well, I grew up with circus and being very, very important in my life, because there was, pre-television, and, to go to the circus as a kid in Port Adelaide was just about as good as it got. And so I've always had a love of carnival and anything like that, and that theatrical bent. And Tangier has got a history of that as well. It's got one of the most beautiful abandoned theatres there. And it's in its heyday would have been stunning, and it's always had people involved in circus there, which I only found out by again staying there. I met a young guy who was a weaver. Oh, well, not a young guy, he's not young anymore, but he was a weaver, and he spoke very good English. And I said, "Where did you learn your English?" He said, "Oh, I learnt that in London and in Spain." And I said, "What did you do there?" And he said, "I was in the circus for 30 years. He was in an Italian circus for 30 years. And I've since discovered there are people training there, and then they go to Spain because it's a way for young Moroccan boys and girls to escape, their background.
Yes, it's not necessarily something you would think about in Tangier.
No.
But I was also wondering about your art, because you've been exhibiting now for about a decade, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
So what kind of art were you making before these particular collages?
I was using projections. I'd find images that I would interest, and then I'd project them onto a model, and then photograph the model with the projection, and that would become it. I never photoshopped. I never touched it. Once I got the shot, I got it, and that was good, but it was limiting to what I could do, because I had some ideas, but they just wouldn't work that way. So I sort of gave it away for about 7 or 8 years. Also, I wasn't overly fond of the whole gallery scene in Melbourne and Sydney. And I just gave it away, and it was only that I was 2 days before I was coming back from Tangier 3 years ago, and a gallery owner had seen that work, and she said, "You're coming back in a year, do you want to have an exhibition?" And I went, "Oh yeah, why not?" So I came back to Australia and then taught myself how to do it the way that I'm doing it now, and it's just an ongoing journey, really.
Well, I'm so glad that it is an ongoing journey for you, Bryan, and thank you so much for coming into the Hub.
Oh, well, thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, and congratulations with your exhibition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bryan Dawe, and Bryan's latest exhibition, Chimera, runs from November the 1st to the 25th at Menion Art Gallery in Gippsland in Victoria. And the official launch is next Saturday, but you can also meet Bryan to speak with him about his art and travels on Sunday, November the 4th. And it's time now for Arts News with Claire Nichols. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Eddie. Eddie, would you buy a piece of art created by a robot?
I think I would probably have to say no.
Well, look, machine that created art is not new, but if you are interested, this week, Christie's Auction House in New York will become the first auction house in the world to sell a work created by artificial intelligence. This piece is called The Portrait of Edmund Bellamy, and it shows this kind of portly clergyman, maybe French, definitely historical. He's got quite blurred out features and some of the canvas is unpainted. But what I think is the most interesting part of this picture is the signature in the corner of the painting, Eddie. It's not a name, but a very long code, and it is min G max D E X square bracket log bracket D bracket X bracket bracket square bracket plus EZ log square bracket 1 minus D bracket GZ bracket 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 square bracket.
Oh, a round of applause, Claire, first of all. Rolling off your tongue. This code is the artist?
Well, yeah, the painting was created by an algorithm, so that code is the algorithm that was used, and this was set up by a Paris-based collective called Obvious. So basically this system was fed with information from 15,000 portraits painted between the 14th and 20th century. It took in all that information and then the algorithm created its own painting informed by all that data.
Okay, so what's the painting worth?
It's expected to go for somewhere between 10 and 14,000 Australian dollars. But for Christie's, what this is really just a test for the market. This is the first time they've done it to see if there is an interest out there in AI-created art.
Okay, and who gets the money?
In this case, the collective Obvious is going to make the profit. Obviously, the algorithm isn't putting up much of a fight. But you know, this does raise a really interesting question about authorship in art, because as one of the guys from Obvious says, if the artist is the one that creates the image, then the artist would be the machine. But if the artist is the one that holds the vision and wants to share the message, that would be us.
Wow, some fascinating times ahead, Claire. And in other news, you have a Banksy update.
I know a couple of weeks ago Alice told you about the Banksy canvas that partially self-destructed at auction, and just a reminder of what that sounded like.
And ladies and gentlemen, Toronto will sell this evening.
So Banksy, as you know, is the anonymous street artist known for his iconic images, including Girl and Balloon. And this canvas of the Girl and Balloon, as it was sold, a shredder built into the frame, that's what you could hear beeping, started to destroy the picture, leaving about a third of it intact. And this was obviously a huge surprise to the crowd and to the auctioneers. And now Banksy's put a new video on his website implying that actually the whole image was meant to be destroyed. It actually shows a rehearsal run showing the shredder being built and a practice run where the whole image was left in tatters. So actually the stunt was a bit of a misfire. What's interesting is the European buyer of the ruined canvas, who didn't know it was going to be shredded when they put in the bid, they were pretty happy with the end result, and they bought the piece anyway for about 1.86 million Australian dollars.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Something that always makes me wonder about Banksy is, why do we assume that that artist is a he? But yeah.
That is a good question, Eddie. I'm going to start saying they until we know better.
Claire, thank you. Now, what's making arts news in Australia?
Well, you'll know that in Canberra this week, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, made an historic apology to victims of institutional child sexual abuse. And in Parliament House's Great Hall, a new artwork was unveiled to commemorate this event. This piece is called The Raft of the Clan, and it's created by the Australian street artist Peter Daverington. And I asked him to describe the work.
It's approximately 3 metres by 5 metres. It's a diptych, but joined as one work. It's got a border of portraits. There's about 36 portraits that frame a central image, which is a riff I did on the composition by Theodore Géricault, one of the great French Romantic painters of the 19th century. His painting called The Raft of the Medusa I thought the raft would be the perfect analogy or metaphor for representing people who were abandoned, by the state.
That's the artist Peter Daverington. Now, the Raft of the Clan will tour the country before eventually becoming part of a new museum promised by the government as part of the apology.
Thanks, Claire. And finally, a new fellowship for female artists.
This is going to be one of Australia's richest fellowships for female artists, Eddie. It's named in the memory of Australian performance artist Cathy Cavalieri, using the proceeds of her estate. And the Cathy Cavalieri Fellowship will award 3 female artists or collectives about $10,000 each to help them realise a big project, which will then be exhibited at the Australian Centre of Contemporary Art, Sydney's Carriage Works and Hobart's Museum of Old and New Art. And Eddie, expressions of interest are open right now.
Wonderful. Claire Nichols, thank you so much. Claire Nichols with today's Arts News.
You're listening to Eddie Ayres and The Hub on Art. Subscribe to the program with your favourite podcast app or listen via the ABC Listen app.
When you think of artists working, you might have an image of a solitary person consumed by their work, silent and pondering. But that's very far from the atmosphere of the Art Gang, a group of artists who meet every Friday at West End's Community House in Brisbane. Art Gang is for people who have sort of fallen through the cracks of our society, but who still have a strong desire and an even stronger need to make art. A warning, there's some strong language coming up, but let me take you to the Art Gang.
Arts on a Friday, it's better than any drugs. We eat chocolate together. That's the drug we do at Art Group.
Begonia, one of the members of Art Gang in Brisbane. You'll meet her properly later. Here's Sue Loveday, the Art Gang facilitator, to explain the setup of Art Gang.
So the Art Gang's attended by people who are dealing with hardship in their day-to-day lives. And that could be in the form of disabilities, mental illness, or isolation that's brought on by any number of reasons. So we're a really diverse bunch of people. And I think the thing that we've got in common is that we love making art. And that really comes through when you meet the gang.
Sue, what's your background as an artist?
My background's in illustration and design. These days I work as a community artist. So I work with people and I get a lot of joy from that, from the benefits of encouraging people to have a creative voice. I think that's one of the best artworks I could ever make. The friendships are what people like this live for, We all live for friendships, and there are some beautiful friendships here. The collaborative thing, I think, is the stories that get told around the table as we're working, and I think that is actually just as important as the art itself. Some of the things I hear are heartbreaking around the table. Some of them are so joyful. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for having me here at Art Gang.
Thank you. I can't wait to introduce you to everybody. Come and have a look. Paddy?
Yeah?
Will you talk to Ed?
Yes.
Paddy, hello, my name's Ed. I'm from ABC Radio.
Oh, yeah?
It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you too.
Can you tell me about how long you've been coming to Art Gang?
About 10 years.
10 years, that's a long time.
Yes, it is.
I'm guessing that you like it if you keep coming back for 10 years.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do like it.
What do you like about it?
I've got talent and bring the talent out. I'm an abstract painter and it takes about 10 or 15 years to get like it. And the talent's just got to come out.
How does Sue and everybody else help you to get the talent out?
Well, I just do the drawing and it just comes naturally. It just comes out.
What are you working on at the moment, Patty?
some tomatoes.
Beautiful. So we've got another drawing in charcoal, and they're tomatoes. Are the tomatoes on the vine?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so we've got these beautiful big plump tomatoes on the vine, and this is your drawing of them. And Paddy, this is wonderful. I love the way you've got this feeling of the tomatoes really falling off the vine. It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, yes it is. Mm.
Patty, when you were younger, did you also do lots of drawing?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I've been doing it ever since I was 23.
How old are you now? I know that's a slightly rude question. If you tell me how old you are, I'll tell you how old I am.
No, I'm 70. It's nearly 71.
You're not.
I am.
You are not. You're kidding me.
No, I'm old.
It's all those big smiles, isn't it, Paddy?
I looked after myself in the younger days, that's why.
At this point, Patty, totally unprompted, explains what happened to her.
I had an accident. But I didn't injure the other part of my body, but I got a good shock on the nut.
You got a bang on the head, didn't you, Paddy?
Yeah, I got a good shock I didn't injure the other part of my body. I just got a good shock on the nut.
Patty, how old were you when you had your fall?
I was only a baby. And if I had to go out to work, I'd be an actress.
And you would be the most beautiful, wonderful actress.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
And we were talking last week, weren't we, Paddy, about your life? And you've had a pretty good life, haven't you?
Yeah, I had a pretty good life, yeah.
What are some of the things that you got up to in your life?
I just went on bus trips and the dances and all that business.
You have had a good life.
Yeah, I know I have. I didn't injure the other part of my body. I only got a good suck on the nut. I was lucky.
You were, and I'm lucky to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Patty turns again to her abstract tomatoes, and Sue leads me down the trestle tables to one of Art Gang's best-selling artists, Kimmy. Kimmy's just sold a couple of paintings.
Rusty colour.
So we might get a rusty collar for you. Okay. And we'll finish this one off today. And then you can start your monkey.
Okay. Can I put my plate back?
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Kimmy, it's great to meet you.
It's pleased to meet you too.
You must be very pleased with your sales.
Yeah.
What did you do with the money?
Joy bought some more clothes for me.
What did you get?
I got new shoes.
So can you tell Ed about what you've been painting lately?
Animals.
Kimmy, can you show me? Ah, look at this. Kimmy, can you say what it is? Can you describe it for the radio?
It's a bird. Kiwi bird.
Kimmy, it's beautiful.
Kimmy does love colours. We work on colours together, don't we, Kimmy?
That's right.
Kimmy, do you remember doing the zebra?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's one of the ones that sold, isn't it?
Yeah. And bag. Big swan bag.
Exactly. Kimmy did a beautiful painting of a swan with a reflection in the water on a shopping bag. We recently took part in an exhibition of shopping bags at Hope Street Cafe, and most of the gang actually had success in selling work, but you sold yours, didn't you, Kimmy?
That's right.
Can you say how it makes you feel when you paint such beautiful animals?
It's good to paint some animals.
Does it make you feel happy?
Yeah.
Do you think you're going to move on from animals to something else?
No.
Just stick on animals?
Yeah.
Humans? I guess we're animals as well.
That's right.
Hey, when you're doing your art, do you like to paint or do you like to draw?
Paint.
You do a drawing first, don't you, Kimmy?
That's right.
And then we put it onto the canvas, and then you paint.
Paint.
Yep. and we choose beautiful colours.
That's right.
And Kimmy, what are you going to paint next?
A monkey on the chair.
Thanks for speaking on the radio. This is for the ABC.
It's all right.
Kimmy, who specialises in animals. Sue now takes me over to the other side of the space, shaded from the Queensland bright morning sun, to meet Begonia.
Begonia, how are you
Hello.
today? You feeling all right?
I didn't want to face this art today because it's about mental health illness, and my mental illness is cracking a little, and this artwork's a bit hard to do. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, and sometimes it's good and creative to do, but sometimes it's hard because it's more like I like doing more abstract and fun art.
I look down at the artwork on the table. Begonia has taken a myriad of pillboxes and tablet strips and created a landscape of psychiatric medicine. Begonia goes on to describe her very personal view of the effects of her own psychiatric drugs. And a warning, there's some very strong language coming up.
So I'm doing a piece on how it's just totally fucked sometimes to how we treat mental illness by just giving humongous amounts of plastic and cardboard boxes full of drugs. I'm kind of sick of the whole, have you taken your tablets today? Maybe that's the problem, that I have taken my tablets today. Maybe my hands are shaking, I cannot type, I cannot carry a cup of coffee, I can't stay awake because you've sedated me too much, I've put on 20 kilos in 1 year, and hello, that might be because I'm depressed, I'm eating, maybe it's because of the tablets, because how come all of a sudden the diet hasn't changed with these tablets? Yeah, so there's a lot of frustration.
Begonia, I know that you said that other people may have done artwork like this, but the fact is that you are living within this situation, and I think it's incredibly important that this artwork comes from you.
I delivered some paintings of begonias to Art from the Margins for the exhibition, and the people there at Art from the Margins loved your two paintings. There was one painting that was very dark and greys and gloomy, and that was called The Depths of Depression. And then Begonia did another painting that went beside it called I See Colours Now. And they really, really loved that concept. And I think it really sums up what we're all about here at Art Gang.
I love Sue, and I love George.
Begonia, saying about as clearly as you can say what the artists of Art Gang feel about Sue Loveday, their facilitator. Art Gang functions pretty much exclusively from donations, art materials, or just money, so if you'd like to find out more, you can go to the website communityplus.org.au, communityplus.org.au. And a huge thanks to the artists and to Sue for letting me visit. Just wondering if can I get some sound effects of painting? Can you fake some sound effects of painting?
Painting sound effects?
Yeah.
What does it sound like, Ed?
I don't know.
John's using a bristly brush.
Yes, he is. Let's see if I can get some.
Yeah, you can hear his sound effect.
That's the sound of the paintbrush going over the paint. Yeah, it's a good day today, sunshiny day in West End.
18 nations, 500 competitors, 8 days. The Invictus Games Sydney 2018. With every sport streamed live on iView and all the action every day at 5 p.m. on ABC TV. Then join Chris Barth, Limo and inspirational competitors every night at 8 for Invictus Games Today. The Invictus Games Sydney 2018, exclusive to ABC.
Jennifer Turpin doesn't like to talk about sculptures. She prefers to speak of artworks, as her pieces aren't necessarily just objects. With her partners at Studio TCS, she specialises in kinetic works in public spaces that interact with the elements. So you may have seen some of them around Sydney, like that rotating halo in Central Park, or the flowing stormwater troughs in Sydney Park that form the work waterfalls. Alice Walker spoke to Jennifer about what she calls her collaborations with nature.
I would describe myself as an environmental artist, and because I've been doing it for quite a long time, I've got involved in a lot of urban design projects together with my colleague Macaulay Crawford. We're always thinking of ways to activate a place at a cultural level.
And by activate you mean, I suppose, energise the space, bring people in.
Yes, make the space energetic and lived in and authentic. It's not like we're trying to impose a layer of culture that doesn't exist. We try and sort of tease out what's there, who are the local artists, how best to respond to that particular place.
To work that out, Jennifer and her collaborators look at the way a site is used, its history and plans for its future. And they figure out ways their artworks can interact with natural elements so their pieces move and change with the weather conditions.
We as artists are always very interested in the local natural environment and looking at how we can connect people or reconnect people with the simple elements of nature like wind, water, tide.
You mentioned that in your work you hope people will reconnect with the environment and with that space. What do you mean by that exactly, and why is that important to you?
Well, I think particularly in our urban living environments, we tend to forget some very basic natural realities, natural phenomena like the wind, like the tide, and like even gravity. We're so busy in our working lives that we tend to take those kind of things for granted. And the work that Macaulay and I do is often about making visible the invisible and bringing us back to the sort of essence of life, if you like, by peeling back the layers and offering artworks that in some ways they're almost barometers of nature. We like to describe them as collaborations with nature rather than representations of nature. So a lot of artworks might be a representation of something, of a landscape or some aspect of nature, but we're actually working directly with the energies of nature.
There are many examples of this among the works of Studio TCS. Take Halo, the oddly tilted yellow ring that slowly spins around a mast with the breeze in Sydney's Central Park, looking a little drunk where a brewery used to be. Or the row of red ladders hinged on the ends of wooden beams at Sydney Harbour, bobbing and shifting with the tide that inspired the work.
So, for example, in Sydney, we have this extraordinary harbour, and every 6 hours there are millions of litres or megalitres of water coming in and out of the heads. And we just don't even think about that. And it's a phenomena of great importance and significance. And even if you're standing on the shore of the harbour and you happen to notice the tide rising, you may not. You're probably not even thinking of that extraordinary force that's happening. And so an artwork we did called Tide to Tide, which is literally tied to the tide, down on the edge of the harbour at Pyrmont. It's basically just there to remind you that of the tide, and so the artwork changes shape every 6 hours slowly, and in between times it performs a sort of ballet choreographed by the harbour's energies. If a boat goes past and there's boat wash, it affects these sort of units that make up an ensemble artwork, and they all move up and down and perform in a rhythmic way depending on the type of wind or the type of boat wash. But at the same time it's slowly changing its position, low tide to high tide.
Some of Jennifer's projects include working with children to teach them about the local environment as they create pieces for installations. One of her own teachers was the late renowned Australian sculptor Tom Bass, known for his totem-inspired public works. I asked her what he was like.
He was a fabulous person. He was so dynamic, incredibly energetic, very intense. He had this intense kind of look and these really intense, bright eyes that always appeared bigger than they really were because he had glasses that made his eyes look bigger than they were. But he was a very warm, generous person, and I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot of things about looking, and I learned lots of practical things from him too, which I'm very grateful for.
Such as?
Such as how to straighten wire, which sounds like a very prosaic thing, but actually it takes quite a lot of skill.
Jennifer Turpin, the artist from Studio TCS. Do you know how to straighten wire? Jennifer will be giving this year's Tom Bass Memorial Address at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. That's on Wednesday the 31st of October, so that's if you'd like to go along and learn more about her work and maybe even how to straighten wire. When you visualise the Australian landscape, what do you see? Sandy white beaches stretching out into an aqua blue sea, red earth dotted with bright green shrubs and flat vastness out to the horizon. Well, I have to say, before I came to Australia, that's kind of all I imagined the landscape here would be, bush and coast, beaches and deserts. But as many of you listening will know for sure, mine was a very incomplete picture of the natural environment here. The writer and curator Amber Creswell wanted to reimagine the way we all think about country. So Amber has produced a book about it. It's called Painted Landscape, and it features the work of 50 contemporary artists. Amber joins me now with one of those artists, Dan Kyle. Dan is a landscape artist who paints the bush in New South Wales. Amber and Dan, thank you so much for coming onto the Hub.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Amber, this isn't the first book on Australian landscape painting that we have, and it probably won't be the last. So what do you hope to contribute to this particular space?
I really felt that when I was ruminating over what angle of Australian art to approach, I just felt that landscape painting in the contemporary context hadn't really been comprehensively addressed. And I feel that books that may have come before this one might have had a bit of a male bias, perhaps a little bit masculine, a little bit pioneering, and I wanted to shake off that old-fashioned notion of Australian landscape painting and really celebrate the colour and diversity of Australian painting today in the landscape context. And I think also over the last few generations, Australia is changing physically, and the people who paint it are also changing.
Now, you talk about the Australian landscape. You break it down into 7 terrain types. So, and that's how you section the book. Can you talk about those 7 types?
Yes. Well, I think it's easy to think about Australia as a red, dusty interior, like you suggested, surrounded by a ring of grey-green trees and meeting the ocean on the outskirts. But I think by separating into these sections, it really shows the richness, and I probably could have given more sections. But I think that the main one that people probably think of is bush, and that's really looking at the sort of typical gum tree type environment of Australia. And then coast, which is another example that people would most likely think of when they think of Australia. But then I dug further into things like farmland. There is a lot of green, bucolic areas of Australia, and that needed to be addressed, and rugged mountains and alpine areas, as well as cities and suburbia, and of course the outback.
So Amber, you wanted to concentrate on contemporary artists, and you also wanted to, and indeed you do have a diverse range of backgrounds, ages. So why was this particularly important?
I wanted it to be contemporary in that they needed to be alive. I needed to be able to interview them. And I really feel like the last couple of generations of Australian painters and Australians in general are shaking off that sense of cultural cringe that we might have been hampered by in the past.
Yes.
We're no longer embarrassed by what Australia is. We're not trying to compare it to our Northern Hemisphere counterparts, and we're celebrating the fact that Australia is different. We're not neat and orderly like the landscapes of Europe and America.
Yes.
And I think it was really important to reframe it in that context.
Thank you, Amber. Now, Dan is one of the abstract painters. So, actually, Dan, I should ask you first. Do you describe yourself as an abstract painter?
I think no, I don't.
I'm so glad I asked.
I definitely think I am a painter who paints in a semi-abstracted sort of way, but not an abstract painter like, say, John Peart or Roy Jackson or Ian Fairweather was.
Yes. Now, Dan, the book actually opens with photographs of you working out in the bush and of your work, so congratulations with that.
Thanks, yeah.
Where do you paint?
I'm from the Blue Mountains, so I'm in Kurrajong Heights, and a lot of my work is done up in Bilpin, which is the town just west of me. So, I spend a lot of time just travelling the Bells Line of Road with some friends, and we get out and paint the national park, the Blue Mountains and the Wollemi National Park.
What do you take with you?
We take paint and we take some lunch and maybe a few beers for the afternoon, and a positive attitude which can sometimes fade pretty quickly when you're painting in the landscape.
Oh, why?
I think that you open yourself up to, weather elements and the sun, so it's hot and
And I guess when you're committed, Dan, to going out for the day, and especially at the extremes of our weather, that can become a very uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, and I think one of the most uncomfortable things about painting outside is sitting on the ground. I think we're not very used to sitting on the ground anymore, especially as adults, and you have to adjust your body, and that's definitely another thing another variable that puts some strain.
Yes.
So,
Dan, when you are painting out in the environment on plein air, what are you trying to capture? So as you, with your paintings, it's clearly a landscape, but it's not a photographic rendition of a landscape. Right. So what is it that you focus on?
Mainly colour and light. So I think that, the bush and the white gum trees in high sun is just so stark, and it's glaring. But you can just sit long enough, you can see just this, very subtle changes in colour and tone, and I think that's what the bush is like and should be painted like. So that's what I try and achieve, I guess.
Yes. Well, Dan, it just sounds and looks, you somehow capture Australia in your painting, so thank you for them. Thank you. Going back to you, Amber, all of the artists in the book live and work here in Australia, but some of the artists are from other countries. So how do those perspectives change with the work? What do those different perspectives show?
I think those artists who weren't born in Australia and came here later in life all very consistently commented on the sun and the difficulty of painting in the Australian sun compared to where they might have come from. The Australian sun is very strong, it casts very black shadows, and it renders colours in the middle of the day. Things that would be green are almost more yellow. And so they had to adjust to that different colour palette, and as a result most prefer to paint in the early morning or in the afternoon when the colours are softer.
Yeah. Now, Amber, you've interviewed these 50 landscape artists. That's quite a feat. For my job, I interview artists, so I can see, the things that it involves. But I was wondering, what common threads did you begin to see emerge as you interviewed these artists?
They all seem to talk about the colours, and it's this sense of colours that take a moment to let your eyes acclimatise to. Everyone talks about Australia ostensibly being grey or olive or beige, but when you look and you really look, you see colours like fuchsia and mauve and gold, and that is something that came up in most chapters. There's also a deep running, particularly in the younger artists that I featured, this sort of conflicted feelings about Australia and our Aboriginal history and colonisation, and feeling a bit fraught about being proud to be Australia and portraying it, but also mixed feelings about how it came to be our land and our home.
Amber, any book on Australian landscape painting, of course, we must have Indigenous artists. So who are some of the key Aboriginal artists who are in the book?
I've got, and I always trip on the names, I must admit, Ivy Paratula, Mervyn Rabunja, Mavis Nalameta and Nicole Chafee are all Indigenous painters or identify as Indigenous.
So there are 4 Indigenous artists, but there are 50 landscape artists in the book. Did you want to have more, or how did that work out?
Yes, but I needed to make sure that I had a good coverage throughout the book of age, gender, and geographical location. So a lot of the Indigenous painters do sort of paint from the same terrain. So I needed to divide up those chapters across all aspects of Australian land.
Yes, and within the Indigenous art in the book, there's a variety of culture and tradition?
Yes.
What is that variety? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Mavis comes from Cape York, so her technique is quite different. She collects ochre, she paints inspired by the areas up north, whereas the 2, Ivy and Mervyn, come from many hands in the Northern Territory. So, and they are both descendants of, I've gone blank actually, from the Hermannsburg School of Art.
Oh, right, yes, Namatjira?
Namatjira, yes.
There we go.
So it's showing that influence of painting in watercolour, which was a different take.
Yeah. How has creating this book changed your own relationship with our landscape?
I definitely see things differently. My eyes are open to colours that I did not see before, and I see beauty in things that used to just be the wallpaper of Australia. Just doing long drives through the country and seeing miles and miles of gum trees, I suddenly now see the structure and the form and the colour and the why that would be a muse to artists now, and I'm always seeing that beauty in places that I perhaps was blind.
And was it a tough gig getting this book up? I can't imagine it would have been easy.
It is a challenge because there are so many artists in the book, and artists are busy and they do like to be painting and not talking to interviewers like myself. But
tell me about it.
Yes, but I was met with much enthusiasm, and I think they all felt that it was time for a book like this.
Yeah.
And something that celebrated something that was obviously close to their hearts. So in that way, it did come together with a lot of camaraderie.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Amber. Thank you very much for coming onto the Hub on Art. And thank you to Dan Kyle. So Dan Kyle, landscape painter, currently working amongst the trees in the Blue Mountains. You have a look out for him if you're going up that way. And Amber Creswell is a writer and curator. Her latest book is called A Painted Landscape Across Australia from Bush to Coast. I have a copy of it here on the desk in front of me, and it really is a glorious thing. It really, really is. It's also an excellent read. Here, you can hear it. The book is published by Thames and Hudson and comes out on the 1st of November. Well, that's it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in. And by the way, if you're heading to Sculpture by the Sea in Sydney, I would so love to hear your take on it. You can tell me what you thought, which sculpture you found most striking. You can email me a voice message, a voice memo to thehub@abc.net.au. That's thehub at abc.net.au, or you can drop me a line and I'll be in touch with you. And that's the same for Art in Your Heart as well. We've had quite a few people calling in with the art that you live with on a daily basis, or the art that somehow stays in your mind, in your memory. So that's the same email address, thehub@abc.net.au. I want you to be part of this programme because it's for you, right? Thanks always to the team, Wendy Love, Alice Walker, Rhiannon Brown, Dave White. I'm Eddie Ayres. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.